Hello, everybody. Glad you're here. And Laura says, hi, all. Avril says, awesome. Received a notification this time. It's been a long weekend without you, Dr. Joe and Bonnie. So much to talk about. Glad to be here. Hi, everyone. And Laura says, sharing. Steve Gonzo is here. Hi, Steve. Please share as much as you can, everybody. AOC is the only one fighting for progressives during Biden's currency crapola installations. Well, we'll see. I'm not sure about that right now. Biden hasn't made a lot of nominations yet. He's been mostly focused in the foreign policy area. hasn't told us really much else. But let us go into some of the stories and the reactions to them. There's a lot of stories out there and lots of reactions to the various stories. So, sorry, I should have shifted to me. You're looking at the promo all this time. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going to remove the promo now. Okay, please remember to go to my Patreon account occasionally. And let me start sharing some of this news. And we'll begin to go over it and get as good a picture of it as we can at this point. Things are far from complete. First thing to note is that Biden can echo Trump's favorite phrase. This is from Dave Dayen on the 23rd. Quote, "You're fired," unquote. The president-elect has the power to get rid of Trump loyalists in a number of agencies on day one. And of course, he is urged to do that. A good number of appointees throughout the government serve at the pleasure of the president, and Biden should use that power. He certainly should. I just wanted to note that he has that particular power. Dave says, in CELA law versus the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Board, was one of the sillier cases in recent Supreme Court history. It used the absurd premise that the nation stood at risk of a runaway federal official going too far in safeguarding consumers from financial scams to reach what in the near term would be a perfectly comforting result. The President of the United States can now fire the director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau at their discretion and install a replacement more in line with their views. For Biden, this means he can immediately terminate the tenure of Kathy Kraninger, the Mick Mulvaney protege who has been irrelevant, if not actively harmful in the cause of consumer protection. So, there it is. Kraninger can be fired. There's a new report from the Revolving Door Project, which identifies numerous officials from critical agencies who can be fired, demoted, or otherwise removed from their jobs at the beginning of the Biden administration. This includes hundreds of U.S. attorneys and inspectors general, the leadership at the FBI and IRS, the general counsel of the NLRB, the two top officials at the Social Security Administration, the chairs of at least 12 multi-member commissions. In particular, Biden can use this authority to completely transform the financial regulatory leadership, putting the deregulatory posture of the Trump years firmly in the past. Yes. Typically, leaders of these agencies step down at the close of an outgoing administration rather than serve a new president. But the Trump regime was, shall we say, unique. Several loyalists of Trump have been burrowed inside the government in the civil service with protections against being fired and the clear ability to sabotage the incoming president. That doesn't apply to the political leadership in the aforementioned positions. It was similarly poised to enact a lot of mischief at the outset of Biden's term. The presidents have the authority to place their own people in most of the leadership roles, and that is not in dispute. Good number of appointees throughout the government serve at the pleasure of the president, meaning they can be fired at will. In March 2017, for example, Trump asked 46 U.S. attorneys held over from the Obama administration to resign. Biden can do the same thing. Trump has already crushed the norm about how continuity dictates that some top officials stay in power from one administration to the next. Given the rogues gallery Trump has put into those positions, the revolving door project argues Biden must do the same in order to preserve the early days of his tenure. What's interesting is how many of these positions involve financial regulation, where the Trump administration's directives have been very clear from the beginning: deregulate everything. Thanks to Saylor law, that case, Biden can immediately fire the CFPB director, by Kraninger, I don't know how she pronounces it, head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, Mark Calabria, who's deeply invested in privatizing mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. He just raised their capital requirements, and returning to the financial crisis posture of giving implicit guarantees to private investors, and the head of the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the OCC, chief regulator for nationally chartered banks. Out of nowhere last week, Trump nominated Brian Brooks, the acting head of OCC, to a full 5-year term, which will keep him in power until after the next election. Presidential election, that is. This would be pretty bad. Brooks was a crony of Stephen Mnuchin's at One West Bank, who in his first week at OCC last June enabled predatory lenders to charge exorbitant rates on consumer loans. Well, I'm not going to go into this one in too much more detail. The point is, Joe Biden can fire and replace a lot of people on day one if he and his people are ready for the new appointments and know the names of the people they have to get rid of. Okay. In cases where it's not possible for Biden to fire people because they've gone into the civil service, what he can do is he can keep them on board of the federal government, but he can replace them with new people who would be the acting head of those agencies and broom closet the people who went into the civil service. So he can take them out of real positions of authority that they had without really breaking any laws. Okay. Once they're broom closeted, they may get unhappy and resign, okay, and leave on their own. But the point is, there are ways for Biden to even replace people who are in the civil service, to get them out of the line of decision making, okay, and in a position to hurt his programs. Okay, to finish this one, there is one person who can sew up the position of the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission. That's Gary Gensler, who is Obama's former Commodity Futures Trading Commission chair. He's a Goldman Sachs veteran, but he became a surprisingly energetic financial reformer during the Obama presidency, earning the enmity of colleagues who were more of the bank-friendly Tim Geithner type. If offered, Gensler would take the SEC job, an important perch for protecting ordinary investors and cracking down on malfeasance at publicly held corporations. He's also on the Biden transition team and has been running the Federal Reserve Banking and Securities Regulators Agency review team. If Biden carries through with changes at the top of the alphabet soup of the FDIC, the NCUA, the CFTC, the FTC, the CFPB, the FHFA, and the OCC, he could, with one series of announcements, sweep aside the Trump deregulatory agenda and install Gensler and his comrades, across the agencies to do the important work of re-regulating the financial system. This is all available to Biden just by following the powers given to a president to name his own team. He should not pass up the opportunity, says Dave Dan. So I will stop sharing that one. And I'll move on to the next one for you to be shared. There's lots of good stuff coming your way here. Okay, got it. Sorry. Take a minute to locate where it is exactly. Okay. We've given almost nothing to states and cities for vaccine distribution. This is a problem that we got to take care of actually quickly. This was done by Dave. It's also an unsanitized column. We've given almost nothing to states and cities for vaccine distribution. He did this on November 23rd. So we've got these vaccines coming down the pike now. Okay, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, for example, the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, which now claims the same levels of success as the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine, which is to say close to 95%. 95%. These are coming down the pike. And by the way, the Russians have a vaccine that they're claiming great things for, and they say that's about to be rolled out and will be made available to the world at a very low price, at perhaps the lowest price of all the vaccines. And to Russian citizens, of course, the vaccine will be free. Okay, and they are offering that as well. So there now appear to be 4 vaccines on the point of getting widely used, maybe by the end of the year. Some people have been speculating maybe people are going to start getting the vaccines by December 10th, which is, 16 days from now. So here we are, have the vaccine. It looks like also the people who have the vaccine are ready to begin, the manufacturers of those. But we have a difficulty, which is there's no money thus far for distribution of the vaccine through our states and our cities. Also, Joe Biden's transition team, as of the 23rd, has no access to the vaccine data and is frozen out of the decision-making process. The infrastructure we currently have for vaccine distribution is by definition weak, says Dave, because the scale of what's needed with this is so massive. The Vaccine for Children program provides something like 3 million shots a year. We need 600 million in a matter of a few months just for the U.S. And the big glaring problem is that in our federal system, the primary role in actually getting the vaccine to people goes to states and localities. And incredibly, there's practically no money for this purpose now. One of the reasons why, of course, is the Republicans don't want to give any assistance to states and cities. Okay, so they don't have money hardly to do anything. They're thinking of cutting people, and now they're supposed to absorb the expense of distributing vaccines. They don't have the money. They don't have the money for this. There are 64 jurisdictional immunization programs, which includes 50 states, D.C., 8 U.S. territories, and 5 large cities. They ask for an allocation, and the government, through Operation Warp Speed, will fill that. But at that point, it's up to the jurisdictions to determine vaccination sites, transport the vaccine to those locations, and make sure there's enough demand at each particular site so the vaccine doesn't go to waste. Pfizer's vaccine in particular, has a short shelf life, just 5 days in the refrigerator. So it has to get out immediately once it reaches the last leg of the journey. Many places don't have the freezers necessary to keep the Pfizer vaccine stored. How much money has been allocated for this? The largest logistical project in the history of mankind. Dave says only $200 million. That's all the jurisdictions have received thus far. Biden has promised $25 billion for vaccine distribution, but that's tied up in the stimulus talks. State health officer, of Mississippi said, hey, we absolutely do not have enough to pull this off successfully. He said to the Times, or she said to the Times, I don't know if it's she or he. This is absolute madness. The economic and public health effects of efficient but delivery of a vaccine are almost incalculable. It will unleash pent-up demand across the country and return the country to something resembling normalcy. As multi-trillion, multi-tens of thousands life action is arresting on a couple $100 million distributed across the country. What? This case study of preparations in my home county, Los Angeles, is instructive. They bought the ultra-cold freezers, which is more than a lot of places can manage. But there aren't any plans on how to ship the vaccine from one freezer to another. The decisions on where to distribute the vaccine haven't been made. All these decisions cost money. Making the wrong one and having to change plans costs more money. The money doesn't exist without federal assistance. So anyway, you can go through the rest of this, but suffice it to say, there's a real cluster, you-know-what, coming up. A real cluster, you-know-what, that is facing us at this point that we have to master. Otherwise, it will have done no good to get all these vaccines out in a hurry. It just will have done no good. It will have been a wasted effort. A wasted effort. So, let me find my next one. So here's more on the cabinet. Article in Common Dreams, November 23rd. From, quote, from alarming red flag, unquote, to, quote, something we can work with, unquote. These are the reactions, campaigners' responses to Kerry as the Biden climate envoy, John Kerry, that is, former Secretary of State, former presidential candidate, came for the Democrats, former senator, former Vietnam war vet, and this article is by Andrea Germanis, a fine staff writer for Common Dreams. This picture of Biden and Kerry. And, of course, they've been friends for some time. Former Secretary of State John Kerry would serve as his special presidential envoy for climate. An announcement that provoked a range of responses from climate campaigners. There were many who broadly saw the pick as encouraging, and others who warned the politically moderate statesman is a troubling choice. So the reaction was mixed. The post, which will not require Senate confirmation because it's not a cabinet position, is within the National Security Council and is being referred to as a, quote, climate czar. Quote, this marks the first time that the NSC will include an official dedicated to climate change, reflecting the president-elect's commitment to addressing climate change as an urgent national security issue, unquote. The transition team said in a statement, and Greta Thunberg said, the statement pointed to Kerry's background as a key architect. Sorry, she didn't say that. The statement from the transition team pointed to Kerry's background as, quote, a key architect of the Paris Climate Accord, from which President Donald Trump withdrew, and Biden has pledged to rejoin. Greta Thunberg tweeted, but good to know, after John Kerry tweeted, that America will soon have a government that treats the climate crisis as the urgent national security threat it is. I'm proud to partner with the president-elect, our allies, and the young leaders of the climate movement to take on this crisis as the president's climate envoy. Green New Deal co-sponsor Ed Markey, who in 2013 won Kerry's Senate seat, praised the nomination, saying that Kerry understands that the climate crisis is the greatest national security threat of our time. I know he will lead with courage and be a tremendous partner to the climate movement and the Biden administration. Washington Governor Jay Inslee, who earned plaudits for making the climate crisis centerpiece of his 2020 Democratic presidential bid, called Kerry, quote, an excellent choice, unquote, in light of his deep commitment to follow science to save our planet and create millions of jobs. Plenty of skepticism about the announcement emerged as well. Emily Atkins said, Biden has announced John Kerry will be his climate czar. This is a huge sign that Biden will favor a moderate climate policy approach that hinges on GOP support. I don't know if I really agree on that. I talked to Kerry about his climate policy strategy this time last year. And there's an article, a conversation with John Kerry, the former Secretary of State and current heated reader talks about his new climate initiative, World War Zero. That was a year ago. A lot has changed in that year. Not only in terms of new scientific research, but in terms of the formation of new climate groups here and of pressure groups that are successfully pinging on Washington continuously and have been changing the political climate. One thing that's changed, since last year is a presidential campaign in which climate was more prominent and which one of the establishment candidates, Jay Inslee, in particular, was talking very, very aggressively about the climate, as of course was Bernie Sanders. The Green New Deal, is in the background now. In other words, since a year ago, the political climate has changed. Maybe Kerry has too. Food and Water Action called the choice an alarming red flag, and the group's executive director, Winona Howder, accused Kerry of being a longtime apologist for fossil fuel fracking, and a reliable promoter of false climate solutions like market-based carbon trading schemes. Yes, he has been. That's very true. But at the same time, the climate crisis has been rapidly accelerating, and the opposition to the climate crisis has been rapidly accelerating as well. She said, Kerry's proposals are tired ideas from years past that will do little or nothing to address our climate crisis and will actually continue to place a disproportionate, unjust burden on vulnerable communities that have borne the brunt of fossil fuel pollution and climate impacts for decades now. As such, we have our work cut out for us, added Howder. Well, whether she's right about Kerry or wrong about Kerry, we still have our work cut out for us. Either way, she's right about that. Still, Greenpeace by USA and the Sunrise Movement said there was reason to be encouraged and pointed to additional climate steps the Biden White House must take. So they're being encouraging. That's in part, of course, a political response. It's the first time that the National Security Council has had someone who's supposed to be fully devoted to the climate and to represent the country to the rest of the world. So that's a significant move. And that someone is a very high prestige person inside of the United States because of his career, because of his closeness to Biden, because of his previous service as Secretary of State. So the appointment is a positive sign, this is a quote, for Biden's intention to integrate climate leadership into every facet of the administration, unquote. That's a quote from Janet Redmond, the Greenpeace climate campaign director. But merely rejoining the Paris Accord, quote, should be the baseline for Biden's climate ambition, not the ceiling, she said, and urged the next administration to make, quote, a commitment to a Green New Deal-style economic recovery plan that includes a just transition for workers and their families, not just golden parachutes for CEOs. And she also said, quote, a further step is to empower a climate council to act on the substantive changes we need to survive, unquote. Sunrise Movement co-founder and executive director Varshini Prakash called it, quote, an encouraging sign of President-elect Biden's commitment to addressing the climate crisis that one of his first staffing decisions is the creation of a high-level office to manage international climate negotiations and appointing a former Secretary of State to lead it, unquote. So that was my thought as well. But I'm not too encouraged, okay, for a moment. I don't think she should be also. Now, her next quote, I worked alongside Secretary Kerry on the Biden-Sanders Climate Task Force and know that he's committed to engaging and listening to young voices. So that's what he said anyway when he was working with Varshini Prakash. Even when we might not always agree and ensuring we have a seat at the table, unquote, she said in a statement. And then, quote, this is an encouraging commitment, but it is not enough, she continued. Of course, okay, it's not enough. And she again called for the, but she made a call directly to the president-elect to include a domestic counterpart reporting directly to the president to lead an office of climate Office of Climate Mobilization, who can marshal, convene, and push federal agencies, departments, states, local governments, industry, and civil society to use every tool at their disposal to address the climate crisis, unquote, she said. So, okay, that's a reaction saying, okay, so far, Joe Biden, but a lot more has got to be done. And she also said that, quote, we need a White House that does absolutely everything in its power to act, pushes every federal department to do the same, and a creative leader with a proven track record of grasping the urgency of the crisis, with a strong team to work alongside the president to make it happen. So she wants somebody, in addition to Kerry, who's going to be working the foreign policy end. She wants somebody else to be working the domestic end and to be coordinating and dealing with all the other places in the federal government that have an impact on the climate. The Biden transition team announced other cabinet appointees, including Antony Blinken for Secretary of State, and we'll get to him in a little while. Alejandro Mayorkas, Secretary of Homeland Security. Avril Haines for Director of National Intelligence. Linda Thomas-Greenfield for U.S. Ambassador to the UN. And Jake Sullivan for National Security Advisor. Okay, and Biden introduced them to the nation today, this morning. Okay, I saw the recording, heard them all speak and thank him and do the usual thing and make very brief, highfalutin speeches from which one could infer very little, of course. But that is business as usual, isn't it? So let's get on to the next one. So the reaction to Avril Haines. Let's get to the reaction to Avril Haines. This was a piece in Common Dreams on the 23rd also by Brett Wilkins. Hashtag feminism, not feminism, not militarism. Peace groups blast Biden's D&I pick over links to drones, torture, and mass surveillance. And here are some remarks from Code Pink and others who were quite critical. In this picture, there's a picture, okay, of Obama, Susan Rice. Next up, Avril Haines is there, and the other lady is Homeland Security Advisor Lisa Monaco. Okay, so there, okay, is Avril Haines. See, she smiles. There are people who like her very much and who give various personal quotes saying, she's the finest human being we've ever met. Someone else who worked with him says she's the nicest person you could possibly know. And she has quite a backstory of her life, which is very, very impressive, as revealed in an article in Newsweek that appeared about her in 2013. I'm not going to go into that stuff. What I want to go into is the reactions. Peace activists on Monday sound the alarm over his pick for D&I, Avril Haines, citing her role in drone strike policy during Barack Obama's presidency in covering up torture perpetrated by members of the George W. Bush administration. She worked very closely with Obama and former CIA Director John Brennan as the administration dramatically increased drone strikes. Also, CIA Director Gina Haspel, as the New York Times noted, will report to Haines Haspel had a role supervising the CIA's torture program, and Haynes supported President Donald Trump's nomination of the agency chief in 2018. As the Daily Beast reported in July, Haynes approved an accountability board, quote unquote, that spared CIA personnel reprisal for spying on the Senate's torture investigators, and was part of the team that redacted their landmark report. After the administration ended, Haynes supported Gina Haspel for CIA director, someone directly implicated in CIA torture, a decision that remains raw amongst progressive activists. Until late June, she consulted for the Trump favorite data firm Palantir, which emerged from the CIA. I don't know if that's accurate. I remember Palantir from very, very long time ago. And at that time, I don't believe it had anything to do with the CIA. I was doing work in the microcomputer industry at the time, and I think I recall Palantir was making and selling accounting software at the time. Now, I know later on they got involved in K intelligence work, and that they've been doing work for the CIA, whatever the CIA has wanted them to do. They've made, a lot of money out of it. Much of that work is undoubtedly reprehensible. Anyway, Haynes' nomination drew praise from Senator Menendez, a Democrat of New Jersey, the ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, who said he was incredibly pleased by the pick, adding, it sends, quote, a clear message of hope and support for American values to the world in choosing candidates who possess the qualifications, the demeanor, and the temperament to serve in leadership positions. Other centrist Democrats expressed similar sentiments. I wouldn't necessarily call them centrist Democrats. They characterize themselves that way, but they're military-industrial complex Democrats in the Congress. In some cases, they're CIA veterans who are now in the Congress. Anyway, Representative Suzanne Delbeni, or Susan Delbeni, I guess it was, government should represent the people it serves. I'm excited the Biden-Harris administration is building an experienced team by nominating Alejandro Mayorkas as the first Latino DHS secretary, Avril Haines as the first female intelligence chief, and Linda Thomas-Greenfield as UN ambassador. And that's a retweet of what the New York Times had to say. And Abigail Spanberger, the CIA lady, who is now the representative in the Virginia 7th, and who recently attacked the squad, in AOC, never wants to hear the word socialism again. Abigail, socialism, socialism, socialism. And never wants to hear defund the police again. Well, there she is. Haynes is the experienced, crisis-tested leader we need by leading the intelligence community. BuildBackBetter.com, the administration. So that's what she had to say. Politicians, press, and pundits took to Twitter to say Haynes is a really nice person. Zev Karlin Neumann said, get yourself a DNI who is a brown belt in judo, built a plane, married her flying instructor. By the way, she's still married to her former flying instructor. Flew across the Atlantic actually, she didn't fly across the Atlantic. I shouldn't have said that. That's inaccurate. She tried to fly across the Atlantic, But she and her flying instructor, her then flying instructor, okay, and boyfriend, uh, started across the Atlantic, ran into ice on the way, and fortunately found an airstrip just off the Labrador coast that they were barely able to lie on, but to land on, because both of their engines had conked out. Fortunately for them, one of their engines caught again shortly before it was time to land. And they found an airstrip, okay, to land on, and the people of the town there, which was a very remote town, but kindly gave them shelter for a couple of weeks until they could manage to get their plane out of there. But they didn't successfully fly across the Atlantic, okay, in the plane. She became a bookstore owner and a community activist. Then she decided to give all that up after it was successful and go to law school. Okay, the tweet doesn't say that. Then she nerded out on treaty law, okay, and international law, and is described as the nicest human alive by Zev Karlin Neumann. That's from, I guess, the Newsweek 2013 piece. So a link to it is there, okay, if you see it. So she's certainly an interesting choice for DNI. But Code Pink, of course, is very, very opposed to her because of what she did while working for the CIA. She worked on Obama's tenfold expansion of drone killings. In fact, she was the one who brought together, okay, a number of agencies to devise a new system for drone killings that would allow Obama to stay in the center as the person responsible for making the decisions. Okay. And yet, to also facilitate a thorough review of, to hear them tell it, okay, of the prospective drone killings before they occurred, and supposedly to be very, very careful about the decisions that they made. I, of course, am not in a position to evaluate it or to justify it, okay, or to say anything about it. The drone killings, it seems to me, were reprehensible in themselves. I'm very much opposed to drone killings, and of course, we know the drone killings involved the killings of American citizens without a trial. Very, very, very reprehensible. And Code Pink says appointing a woman to be director of national intelligence does not justify, atone, or excuse the U.S. intelligence community's murderous drone strikes and violent counterterrorism strategies. Okay, and Danny Badgerson, who's a historian, okay, and a vet, of course. Okay, I think he's a major. Okay, at this point, highly decorated, very anti-war. Says Uncle Joe's inbound nieces and nephews recall Aesop's fabled quote: "You are judged by the company you keep." Unquote. Meet Avril Haines, National Security Team, CIA, DNI prospect, signed letter backing Trump's nomination of torture complicit Gina Haspel at the CIA, okay, along with, and then there's an article cited there, the cipher brief. So there's plenty of negative reaction to Avril Haines by coming from the progressive side. But I will tell you this, based on the biography, okay, of Avril Haines, she seems like a woman, okay, of many parts, highly intelligent in many, many different fields, okay, and a lawyer, and a very good lawyer, apparently. How she'll act within the Biden administration, I think, will probably depend on the policies that Biden himself would like to follow. She will be a ready tool for whatever he wants to do. But I don't believe that she'll try to usurp a policy in a Biden administration or run that particular policy. She will have power, though. She'll have considerable power to give him options. And of course, the power to give options to a decision maker is the power to frame the decision. So she will have that kind, okay, of power. And she can abuse that power. From what I've read about her, I'm not sure she will abuse that power, but she can. It's dangerous. So there's more on that. She worked for West Exec Advisors, a recently formed Washington firm, the founders of which were Tony Blinken, the Biden choice for Secretary of State, and Michelle Flournoy, known as a former Obama and Clinton hawk, who is widely considered the front runner to become the first woman defense secretary. And from what I've heard of all the people we've mentioned so far, from the anti-war standpoint, she is probably the worst of these particular candidates, but she hasn't been announced yet. And writing at The Guardian on Saturday, there's a quote from a woman, okay, by the name of Arwa Madawi, who cautioned against, quote, acting like Flournoy's likely appointment as head of the Pentagon is some kind of win for feminism. Quote, there is nothing remotely feminist about women in rich countries dropping bombs on women in poor countries, unquote, wrote that's okay what Arwa Madawi wrote. So I'll stop sharing this, okay, and get on to the next one. Hang on a second. I'm trying to find it. Here's a reaction to Biden's pick for Department of Homeland Security. You remember that appointment, was Alejandro uh, uh, Alejandro Mayorkas, the first the person of Latin origin to be Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, and but demanding reversal of Trump cruelty on immigrant rights groups. Welcome Biden pick, of Alejandro Mayorkas for DHS Secretary. This one's by Kenny Stansel. It was written today on November 24th, and the reaction to him was very favorable. Arturo Vargas, CEO of the National Association of Latino elected and appointed officials, NALEO, said that his keen knowledge of our immigration policies and procedures, as well as his commitment to a fair immigration system, makes him exceptionally qualified. Citing his work at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, Vargas pointed out that, quote, in addition to his tireless work to make naturalization truly accessible and affordable, Mayorkas oversaw the building and implementation of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the DACA program, which Trump has attempted to dismantle. His work at the U.S. CIS, which is the Citizenship and Immigration Service, also included promoting the importance of working with stakeholders and community organizations. Vargas added, quote, he created the Office of Public Engagement, helping to promote and strengthen those relationships. Adding to the chorus of approval for him was Representative Joaquin Castro, a Democrat of Texas, chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Castro said the CHC is eager to work with the nominee to, quote, treat immigrants with dignity and respect, unquote. Quote again, a dedicated public servant and a Cuban immigrant, Alejandro Mayorkas, is a fantastic choice to lead DHS, Castro said, and quote again, after the cruelty and devastation wrought by the Trump administration, Mayorkas has a mandate to overhaul the DHS. And there are some more quotes, but Greza Martinez, Rosas, who's executive director of United We Dream, said, welcome news. It will be the first Latino to lead the DHS. He's been confirmed by the Senate 3 times already. He's helped to make DACA a reality. Has a clear mandate with President-elect Biden to enact bold and swift executive actions that bring accountability to ICE and CBP and reunite our loved ones. So that seems to be popular there. Okay, more approvals. There are no people quoted who offer any qualifications that I see, in this article. So the reaction seems to be a uniformly favorable one to this particular pick, as far as we know, including from people who claim to be progressives. Here's something else on the cabinet. Some more, it's not quite the cabinet news yet. It's sort of like on the fringe of becoming the cabinet news. This is also from Common Dreams. It's by Jake Johnson. Shameful and concerning he is even being considered, quote unquote, says AOC, as Rahm Emanuel floated for role in Biden cabinet. And Jake says, progressives are vocally making clear that any cabinet post for Rahm Emanuel, no matter how low profile or obscure the position, is unacceptable amid reports that President-elect Joe Biden is considering a spot in his administration for the left-punching former mayor of Chicago, who is notorious for his role in covering up the 2014 police murder of 17-year-old Laquan McDonald. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was among the progressive lawmakers who responded with alarm and outrage to fresh reporting from the local newspaper Crane's Chicago Business. I have to say, I completely shared this reaction when I heard it, which said Emanuel has been floated as a potential candidate for U.S. Trade Representative, a less visible position than the top spot at the Transportation Department that he has reportedly been lobbying for behind the scenes. The way I heard the story is that, at first, is that, Rahm he's not going to be considered for the top spot at the Transportation Department because of all the opposition to him. However, maybe we can put him in a less visible position like that of a trade representative for the U.S. And when I heard that, I said, what? That's even worse than the top spot at the Transportation Department. Then he can take his neoliberal self and start to revive the terrible TPP, TPIP, and TISA trade agreements that we hated so much in the Obama administration. That's even worse than his being transportation secretary. Anyway, that was my reaction when I first heard about it. So, but what is so hard to understand about this? Rahm Emanuel helped cover up the murder of Laquan McDonald. Covering up a murder is disqualifying for public leadership, unquote. Ocasio-Cortez tweeted Monday, quote, this is not about the visibility of a post. It is shameful and concerning that he is even being considered. It's like, what did Nixon do in the 1970s? He didn't commit a burglary. He covered it up. And he got impeached and banished from Washington for his troubles. That's what happened when we weren't so jaded about all these kinds of things. Then covering up a burglary was disqualifying for the presidency. Here, Rahm covered up a murder. So, of course, I entirely agree with AOC. This is not about the visibility of a post. It is shameful and concerning that he is even being considered for dog catcher. She didn't say for dog catcher. I added that. I have a tendency to add cliches to stuff, you might have noticed. New York Democrats' unequivocal rejection of any cabinet spot for Emanuel, a fervent opponent of progressive policy objectives, yes, like the Green New Deal and Medicare for All, was echoed by other members of the so-called squad, including one of the informal group's newest members, Cori Bush, okay, specifically. Thing about covering up the murder, okay, uh, Laquan McDonald is that it disqualifies you from holding any type of public office forever, unquote, tweeted Cori Bush, whose involvement in campaigns against police violence fueled her decision to run for Congress. And Representative Rashida Tlaib and Representative-elect Jamal Bowman of New York also spoke out on Twitter. Less visible role doesn't sound good either. The people of Chicago said it best. Should Biden hire Rahm Emanuel? Chicago says, quote, never, never, never. And Jamal Bowman said, he should not be considered for any position within the Biden administration. Then the article says, given his reputation as an egomaniac, some raise the possibility that the swirling rumors about a potential cabinet role for Rahm Emanuel are coming from the former Chicago mayor himself, who did not hesitate to viciously attack and denigrate by the progressives during his tenure as Obama's chief of staff. Yes, he called us the dirty fucking hippies, quote unquote, otherwise known as the DFHs, an expression that has fallen somewhat into disuse but was rife in 2009 and 2010. Quote, I strongly suspect that Rahm is generating most of this copy himself, and Team Biden is happy to have Rahm hanging out there so his other picks get less scrutiny, unquote, tweeted the American Prospect's David Daya. So that's about it, except one more quote from the representative-elect, Mondare Jones of New York. Quote, imagine thinking it's, quote, divisive, unquote, to want someone other than the guy who covered up a murder to lead a department or agency, unquote. So on that note, we'll stop sharing this one and move along here. Okay. One more. This is not on cabinet news, but it has something to say when it comes to what can be done with pressure. It has something to say about what can be done with people or by people that are willing to pressure and make a lot of noise, okay, and get into the media. This one is about Dianne Feinstein. It's also from Common Dreams. Headline is Feinstein steps down as top judiciary Democrat. The Sunrise Movement demands she go one step further. Quote, resign, unquote. despite Jake Johnson also. There's Diane sitting right next to her boyfriend, Lindsey Graham. I'm joking, of course. After facing widespread backlash over her genial performance during Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation hearings last month, Senator Feinstein announced Monday she will step aside as the top Democrat on the powerful Senate Judiciary Committee, a move that was welcomed by progressives as a, quote, necessary step toward reforming a federal judiciary that Donald Trump has packed with right-wing judges. But the youth-led Sunrise Movement, whose activists Feinstein smugly berated last year in a confrontation captured on video, demanded that the California Democrat go further than merely declining to seek the top post on the Judiciary Committee. They said, quote, but today Senator Feinstein released a statement saying she was going to focus more on the climate crisis and relinquish her Judiciary Committee leadership, unquote. Evan Weber, the Sunrise Movement's political director, said on Monday evening, quote, let's be clear. There's no way that would have happened without our movement. I think that's true. But our demand is and has been for Senator Feinstein to not just step down, but resign. And he went on to urge Feinstein to, quote, make way for more representative leadership from California, new senators who will actually fight for a Green New Deal, like Representatives Ro Khanna and Barbara Lee. Quote, Feinstein lost all credibility when she showed she was more willing to treat with contempt 11-year-old climate activists demanding a livable future in her office than the Supreme Court nominee who refused to say whether she would uphold the laws that would give that future a fighting chance. Quote again, Feinstein told our generation that she, quote, knew what she was doing, unquote, when it came to the climate crisis. Then she enabled and normalized the GOP's theft of a Supreme Court seat and may have lost Democrats the Senate, unquote. She may have, indeed. That's the statement from the Sunrise Movement. Feinstein said in a statement late on Monday she intends to, quote, increase her attention, unquote, on the wildfires and droughts ravaging the state of California. She acknowledging they're only getting worse with climate change, unquote. But when youth activists visited her office last February and demanded that she support transformative policies that would tackle the climate emergency, such as the Green New Deal, the California Democrat flippantly dismissed the demands. You come in here and say it has to be my way or the highway. I don't respond to that, unquote, she said. I know what I'm doing. Maybe people should listen a little bit, unquote. And of course, she made herself some enemies doing that. Based on seniority, the Senate Minority Whip, Dick Durbin, and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat of Rhode Island, are next in line for the top Democratic spot on the Senate Judiciary Committee. In a tweet late on Monday, Durbin announced his intention to seek the role. Demand Justice, part of the chorus of groups that called on Feinstein to give up her leadership role on the key panel, applauded the senator's decision to step aside, said she should be replaced on the committee by someone who will not wishfully cling to a bygone era of civility and decorum that Republicans abandoned long ago, unquote. This was a necessary step if Democrats are going to meaningfully confront the damage Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell have done to the federal judiciary. Brian Fallon, executive director of Demand Justice, said in a statement, and quote again, "The next top Democrat on the committee must be someone who is willing to fight for President-elect Biden's nominees, no matter what, and who will pursue bold action to restore balance to our courts, like court packing, for example." Doesn't say that, but obviously that's the underlying meaning of this, like court packing. Court packing, if possible, because court packing is probably going to be necessary. So a couple more things to share. First, just a little note, something to note, something to keep in mind, something to put in your pipe and smoke, which I used to do when I smoked a pipe many, many years ago now. How long? I guess it must be 32 years ago now. Anyway, high drug prices could result in premature deaths of more than 1.1 million seniors in the next decade. It says an analysis, and this is written by Kenny Stansel. It was done on November 23rd. And this was a study by the West Health, the Policy Center, a nonprofit and nonpartisan policy research group, and by Zenda, the research arm of Amerisource, by Bergen, a drug distributor. I think a drug distributor out of Holland, I think. Researchers expect, quote, cost-related non-adherence to drug therapy to increase not only unnecessary suffering, but also Medicare spending, as deteriorating health conditions drive up preventable expenses by more than $177 billion by 2030. Unless drug prices are reduced, the analysis estimated 112,000 seniors per year could succumb to early death as a result of their not being able to afford their prescriptions, their medications. In addition, researchers projected that health complications stemming from the unaffordable cost of prescriptions will force Medicare to spend nearly $18 billion annually on avoidable medical expenses. So that's it. One more reason for preferring Medicare for all, for demanding Medicare for all, for pressuring for Medicare for all, and for not settling for any less. If Medicare were able to directly negotiate with pharmaceutical companies, as described in H.R. 3, the Elijah Cummings Lower Drug Costs Now Act, which has languished on the desk of the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell since it was passed by House Democrats in December 2019, would result in dramatically lower prescription drug prices. So this article is in support, of H.R. 3, but I think, of course, it also supports, generally speaking, Medicare for All program. According to the Council for Informed Drug Spending Analysis, if we were to allow Medicare to negotiate and limit drug price increases, we'd be able to prevent nearly 94,000 deaths per year while also reducing Medicare spending by almost 476 billion by 2030. So I thought that article was an interesting one to look at. And if you're interested, follow down the links from that article as well. Next, and actually last, quote, go big and stay big, unquote. Economists call for $3 trillion COVID relief package to stop the nation's descent into to ruin. Now, this is based on a report from the Economic Policy Institute, okay, the EPI, which is a progressive economics institute in Washington, D.C., but it's old-style progressive. Okay, in other words, it's a tax and spend type of orientation to economics. In the past, it's been okay with what I call the progressive give up formula, but there are good economists in it. I mean, I've been citing Heidi Shierholz quite a bit on here, on labor policy, and also Josh Bivens does very good work, okay, in macroeconomics, but of course doesn't seem to have absorbed the ideas, okay, on monetarily sovereign currency that are offered, okay, by MMT. He's still tax and spend, and if not tax and spend, then debt finance, okay, and spend. Now he's on the debt finance and spend idea. And of course, he's very exercised by the economic crisis we have now to forestall a nation's ongoing plunge into financial devastation as some crucial relief programs expire and others are recklessly terminated by the Trump administration. Economists are calling for a $3 trillion debt finance coronavirus stimulus package that includes enhanced unemployment benefits, robust fiscal aid to state and local governments, also nutrition assistance, and other safety net expansions. So far as it goes, this is, of course, okay, a great idea. The outlines of the programs are stated here, okay, in bullet points, okay, in this article. He calls on Congress to approve a relief package containing, at a minimum, $600 per week federal boost to unemployment benefits until mid-2022. So he's calling for this for all of 2021 and halfway through 2022 as well, giving people time to recover, at least people who were employed. Okay. And of course, he's got to make it applicable to people who had jobs but then lost their jobs and whose unemployment benefits, whose standard unemployment benefits have now expired. So they have nothing. Okay, well, this is not going to do too much good because what are there, 30 million people on unemployment right now whose benefits are soon to expire? A lot. Okay, bullet point 2, $500 billion at an annualized rate in aid to state and local governments. So he's saying $500 billion to state, okay, and local governments for as long as it takes to end their financial problems, and $100 billion at an annualized rate for SNAP, Okay, and rental assistance. That is very good because the Trump administration has been cutting back on all that. Public investments in early child care and education and in mitigating greenhouse gas emissions that ramp up immediately and reach peak levels of $400 billion annually by the fourth quarter of 2021. I don't think that squares with Joe Biden's program. I think Joe Biden's program for the green initiatives that he plans called for $500 billion annually over 4 years. I'm sorry, over 2 years. No, right. Sorry. $2 trillion over 4 years, which is $500 billion a year. And that's just the green part of it. In other words, that does include expenditures on child care, okay, and education. So Biden's program would actually call for more. So if we were to go with Biden's program or incorporate that in something like this particular package, we might be looking at a package that's $4 trillion or $4.5 trillion. Also, I don't see any mention that's made here, okay, of any stimulus payments. At this point, considering that people have been without assistance for quite a few months now, I think that people maybe need one-time stimulus payments. That would help people and catch people who are not in the federal employment system, but who nevertheless have been victimized in various ways by the crash which has occurred due to COVID, and who need assistance, okay, as well. And so stimulus checks would probably be in order too. So I think we're looking at something more like $4 trillion, okay, than only $3 trillion. Of course, I have to take issue with Bivens saying, emphasize the importance of funding the relief package with debt rather than taxation. Why do people from the so-called progressive think tanks in Washington want to finance these things by issuing debt instruments? Sure, we can issue the debt instruments in as much quantity as we want. Sure, we can find the people to buy the debt instruments. That is no problem. We can always pay the interest on the debt instruments. That is never a problem. Sure, the interest rates are near zero right now, so that part, okay, would not be a problem. But the increasing debt is a political problem. It is something the Republicans are going to point to in 2022. Let's say Biden could get this relief package through, and there was a $4 trillion relief package funded by debt. Then the Republicans are running for office in 2022, and they're going to say, we owe 20, probably be 27 trillion by then. We owe 27 trillion in debt. Our grandchildren are going to be swamped with this additional debt. Why give them that kind of political purchase? Why not just use overt congressional financing or use platinum coin seigniorage to deficit spend? Yes, it's important that this be deficit spending. It's important that it should not be supported by taxation. It's important money needed in the economy not get pulled out of the economy. At this point, it would be less effective if it was supported with taxes. Okay, at this point, it would also be harder to pass if it was supported by taxes. Why not try supporting it with the monetary sovereign power of the federal government itself? Under the authority Congress has to simply create those reserves in the Treasury spending account. That can be done either directly with a couple of paragraphs in the appropriations bills, that's overt congressional financing, or it can be done through platinum coin seigniorage, as was proposed in the ABC Act that was offered by Jayapal and Rashida Tlaib last spring. Fund things in that way. Why fund them through debt and have to argue with the debt hawks come 2 years from now and have to try to make the case to the public that the debt is not really important? Why do that when, if we fund it right now in the ways that I suggested, and we make provision for the debt that falls due to be paid during this time using reserves created in the same way, we can both do the deficit spending and also demonstrate to people that there's no debt problem, that we can start paying it down anytime we want without taxing people. Why not do that? What is wrong with these people? I mean, Biden can do it. He can do it if we can gain control of the Senate. I shouldn't say we. If the Democrats can gain control of the Senate with victories in Georgia on January 5th, he'll have the control of the Senate he needs to pass this kind of bill and to have it funded using overt congressional financing. Once that is done, once that happens once, there's no turning back. People will be able to observe the relief coming, the economy recovering, and they'll also be able to observe the public debt becoming lower than it was before. They'll be able to pay off a large portion of the public debt using overt congressional financing or platinum coin seigniorage within 6 months of implementation of the bill. It will be visible to everyone, okay, that the debt is, I don't know, I mean, I could look up how much of it is going to fall due to be paid off. But within 6 months, it will be many trillions of dollars. I will tell you that. At the end of 6 months, Biden will be able to point to it and say, look at what we did over the last 6 months. We paid off $6 trillion of the national debt, or $9 trillion of the national debt that fell due within these 6 months. We paid it back. We don't have a debt problem. We just illustrated, we showed you we don't have a debt problem. Once people see that, we will have gotten rid of the whole ecology of debt terrorists that exists in Washington and New York. We will never have to deal with them again. So I wish organizations like the EPI would start urging that, start advocating for it, start advocating for using the monetary sovereign power of the United States of America. They just resist. They resist committing themselves to this idea. They're still so afraid of inflation, even in the middle of this terrible crash that we're about to come upon. It is ridiculous. Well, some of what Bivens says is really good. He writes that, quote, the point of federal spending now is to boost aggregate demand growth, spending by households, by businesses, and governments. So financing this support with taxes would make it less effective. Bivens also stressed the need for sustained fiscal support instead of relief that expires before the economy is fully recovered. Policymakers should not phase out funding too quickly and must continue fiscal support through the end of 2024, he's saying. We have to be careful not to think of this as jump-starting an engine and instead think of it like towing a car out of a rough patch to smooth the ground. If larger fiscal support is removed quickly, the fiscal contraction can overwhelm private sources of growth and tip the economy back into recession. It's really great that he's beginning to realize that you can't just use Keynesian notions here. There has to be not a short-lived stimulus, but a long-lived stimulus. It's only a short step to say, it's not a question of stimulus. It's a question of putting money into the economy and maybe continuing funding at that level permanently or semi-permanently. And don't worry about it, because we're a monetary sovereign and we can do that. So then they talk about some of the political problems here. And a quote from Ocasio-Cortez, quote, people across the country are going hungry. COVID is set to explode. And Mitch McConnell dismissed the Senate last week. She tweeted on Monday. She says, I don't know how these people can sleep at night, said to the New York Democrat. Okay, I really don't. Well, maybe we ought to find their personal phone numbers and call them all at, maybe 3 a.m. and say, we were sure that you couldn't sleep at night because you never passed a stimulus bill. We just didn't know how you would be able to sleep at night, so we figured that you were up. And therefore, it was all right to make this call to you at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's what we thought. Since Congress passed the $3.5 trillion CARES Act in March, the article says, I don't remember any $3.5 trillion CARES Act in March. What I remember is a $2.2 trillion CARES Act in March that under some interpretations could be interpreted as a $2.4 trillion CARES Act in March. But the only thing close to a $3.5 trillion figure that I've heard was the $3.4 trillion HEROES Act that was passed in June by the House and it's still lying somewhere on Mitch's desk. Final quote from this article, Senate Republicans are failing the American people, quote unquote. said Barbara Lee of Democrat of California. Quote again, families will not be able to survive the holiday season and some of the darkest days of this uh, pandemic without relief, unquote. So this is based on a report from the EPI. I've linked to the report uh, in my description, and you can read it, okay, at length. Certainly better than what some people are saying. I'd be more comfortable forgetting about the federal boost to unemployment benefits and just giving everybody what the Automatic Boost to Communities Act specified, specifically um, 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 giving people a basic income of $2,000 a month, $1,000 for each child for as long as COVID lasts. Okay, and then when COVID is gone, to scale that down to a basic income of I think if I recall, it fell to 1,000 a month. After that, for each person, and $500 each child for a family of four. It was still 3,000 a month for 1 year after that. I think people might probably prefer that to the 600 per week federal boost to unemployment benefits until mid 2022 because of the basic income is something people would be better able to count on. And second of all, I think if you look at the total money involved, it's probably a little more money for household if you look at it from a household point of view. Okay. So, anyway, I've given you the link to the full report, so you might want to read the full report, and you also might want to note that this particular report will probably have some influence in Washington. It will be circulated to all the House members. It'll be circulated to all the members of the Senate. This is a think tank that has a long history. In Washington, people read their stuff, especially people who think that they're on the progressive side. It'll probably be read or noted anyway in some way by all the progressive members, all the members of the Congressional Progressive the caucus, for sure. So it's going to be influential, that's for sure. Okay, before I go, I did want to say something about the Treasury Secretary before I begin to consider your comments. I did want to say something about the Treasury Secretary. Okay. Specifically, we have, of course, Janet Yellen, okay, who has been announced informally, not introduced by Biden yet, but he's announced informally that she is his choice for the Treasury Secretary. Now, she's known to us as the chair of the Fed, and she was generally a loose money advocate when she first came in, but she seemed to want to raise interest rates before things were really fully under control, because she was concerned about the possibility, of inflation. And a lot of people are concluding from that she's like all the other neoliberals. Well, historically, in terms of her career, she was not like that. She and her husband were people who were concerned with corruption in the system, looting in the system. As far as I know, they were never bought off, by Wall Street. They basically, were academics. They were never much concerned with doing the bidding, of Wall Street. Her husband is a Nobel Prize winner. I think it's for his work in the area of economic looting, actually. She has written books with him. I think they together, in their economic views. So I don't think she's a standard kind, of neoliberal. I don't know if Biden knows that. He probably knows her as someone who's has a vaguely progressive cast. I personally think that as Treasury Secretary, she's going to be more active about implementing regulations that she can have, an influence on. And I think she's going to be open to a lot more fiscal support and will worry a lot less about the debt. Now, I know she's spoken against the debt before from time to time, but I don't think she's ever been a debt hawk. I don't think we'll see that from her. I also think that she will be subject to other opinions that will filter up through the administration and that are circulating in the air right now based on the increased influence of MMT people. What I'm saying is, it's my hunch. I don't know for sure, and I may be wrong about this, but it's my hunch that the first appointment in the economic area, the Treasury Secretary, is a comparatively progressive appointment, better than Lyle Brainard would have been. I don't view Janet Yellen as a standard kind of free trader also. I don't think we'll see that from her. I think she'll be able to easily work with the chair of the Fed, with Jay Powell, who has expressed lots of concern about where the economy is going and wants to do something about that. I think she and Jay Powell are going to come together on how that might be and could be done. I think she will also be influenced by the other economic people in the administration. We have to watch closely who those are going to be to know more about what she's going to be like. If Jared Bernstein has a very influential position, for example, if he's appointed as the chair of the Council, of Economic Advisors, he's going to be influential in talking to her. He's not an austerity hawk. He's not going to support austerity. He's going to want to spend money and have big deficits and fix the economy. If Stephanie gets appointed to the Council, of Economic Advisors, she's going to be very influential, and she'll probably be talking a lot to Janet Yellen, much more than she has in the past, okay, when Janet Yellen was at the Fed. So I think that MMT voices are going to get in there, and that what we have to do now is watch closely who else Biden is looking at appointing. For example, Bruce Reed. If he appoints Bruce Reed to a key position like Office, okay, of Management and Budget, that could be a disaster. We certainly want to oppose that kind of appointment, okay, a deficit hawk in the Office of Management, okay, and Budget. But one thing that's marked the appointments of Biden so far is that he's appointing people he's worked with a lot and who he considers to be friends. Now, throughout the Obama administration, Jared Bernstein was his chief economist. I'd be surprised if he doesn't have a lot of faith in him. In fact, I'd be mildly surprised if Jared wasn't appointed to be the chairperson of the Council, okay, of Economic Advisors. I kind of expect that. Now, there's also the National Economics Council as well. I don't know if I have the name exactly right. But that's more a council of policymakers that is chaired by a figure like a chief economist. Janet Yellen has over the years been close to Joe Stiglitz. Joe Stiglitz is one of the most progressive of economists. He's friends with Jamie Galbraith, but Stephanie also knows him and has talked to him, Stephanie Kelton. If Biden moves to Joe Stiglitz, that's a signal that he's wanting a progressive to moderate the National Economics Council, which is the policy body, as opposed to the research body. Now, of course, the research body is going to advise on economics policy too, and fiscal policy. But what's probably going to happen is the findings of the CEA are going to be brought to the National Economics Council by the chairperson. And that's going to be the route for decision making that will end with Biden. As the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen will be a very important part of the National Economics Council. If Joe Stiglitz turns out to be the chair, or Jamie Galbraith, let's say, turns out to be the chair, that will be very good for fiscal policy, at least for the advocacy of certain fiscal policies by the executive branch. So we got to watch for those kinds of appointments. They could be very, very important for us and a very, very good sign about how Biden is going to turn to try to get out of the economic mess we are in. And of course, we have to watch for the appointment of MMTers and job guarantee advocates to the Council of Economic Advisors. One job guarantee advocate is Derek Hamilton. Another job guarantee advocate is Stephanie Kelton. Third, is Pavlina Chernyova. So we have to watch out, if she might be appointed, as well. We'll know more, and probably within a week or two. He has said, actually, in a few days, he's going to talk more about his economics appointments. So maybe there'll be a whole slate of them, and we'll see who they are. If Jason Furman is appointed, it would be a bad sign. Or Larry Summers, that would be a bad sign. Gene Sperling might be appointed too. That would be less of a bad sign, but I wouldn't say that would be a good sign. I think Gene Sperling is still too hung up on old-style Keynesianism and old-style Keynesian policies. Gene Sperling is kind of like Larry Summers Jr. During the Clinton years and the Obama years, when Larry Summers would go into a position and then he would finally depart to go back to the private sector and make money, Gene Sperling would take over his position because he was Larry Summers Jr. But he's not as arrogant, okay, as Larry Summers. He's not considered as brilliant, okay, as Larry Summers. I personally don't think Larry Summers is so brilliant, but he's a relative of Kenneth Arrow and Paul Samuelson. So when Larry Summers came on the scene, I mean, everybody assumed, man, this guy's a genius. He's got such great genes. So there was kind of a mystical aura, and has always been about Larry Summers. But no matter how many stupid moves he pulls, there's this aura about him that he's really a fantastic genius. I really don't know where that comes from, because this fantastic genius doesn't seem to have had any right guesses for a very long period of time. But that's another question that we can go over on some other occasion. Okay, the point is, that's what we have to watch out for now. The appointment of Janet Yellen as the Treasury Secretary is not what we would have liked to have seen, but it is not yet a bad sign. It may be a good sign, interpreted in the context of other people who are going to be appointed. Okay, I'm going to turn to your comments now. Dolores says, sharing. Avril says, AOC is the only one fighting for progressives during Biden's currency crapola installations. Kay says, hi, all glad to see you. Kay says, shared. Avril says, hi, Twinkle Toes. Kay says, hi, Avril. Avril says, so is Biden going with Janet Yellen for Secretary of Treasury? Yes, I believe he is. And Avril says, hi, girl. Avril says, Trump with thin skin wants to take food stamps from seniors in assisted living homes and perhaps even other seniors as well. This cruel proposal during the plague when food shortages are popping up constantly. This guy's such a... He's just an evil guy. He just is. He's fucking mean. It's just mean. Avril says, I want that stem cells in the neck injections treatment all the corrupt politicians are getting for COVID. Is that the antibody treatment? The antibody cocktail? Kay says, the Russian one doesn't work too well from what I have heard. Well, that's not what I've been hearing. I think it depends on what outlet you read as to whether it's working too well or is not working too well. I've heard that recent research shows it's just about as effective as the other one that we have heard about. But the truth is, we will not know about that for a while. We have to wait and see. Avril says, I think that Europe, that Europe has bought it in droves. I think that's right. Avril says, you have to get 2 COVID vaccine treatments, and it said the side effects aren't anything nice. I believe that's true, that the side effects are not nice, that you could get chills, body pains, stuff like that. But supposedly by the next day it's gone. Steve Gonzo says Oxford COVID vaccine, unlike Moderna and Pfizer, want to distribute their vaccine globally on a not-for-profit basis. Yeah, okay, I think they would. So hopefully Kaiser will buy it from them. That's what I have to say. Instead of spending a fortune on Moderna. Kay says, I'm not looking forward to taking any of it, to be honest. Albert says, when the hell did Kerry ever care about climate change? Well, as I think I read, he was one of the architects of the Paris climate accords. But, okay, I always had the impression that Kerry was kind of favorable to green stuff. Even when he was back in Massachusetts, okay, and he was a senator. I mean, I always had the impression that that he wanted to do something about climate change. Now, I know he's advocated for fracking from time to time. Okay, says they need, but Michael E. Mann, climate scientist. I'm sure Michael E. Mann will be a consultant, but for the administration. Steve Gonzo says, original article, Facebook, well, that's successful, not-for-profit Oxford COVID vaccine threatens big pharma. Good. That's what's necessary. Kay says, cases of the virus have been going up where my roommate works. Shake my head. Employees and residents. Okay, it worries me. Steve says, I'm not on board with an RNA experiment for a non-isolated virus vaccine. I'm not sure I understand exactly what you said, Steve. Kay says, glad that Rump is finally out, but I have my doubts about Biden too. Well, we all have doubts about Biden. Okay. One would be foolish not to have doubts about Biden. Steve Gonzo says the U.S. and U.K. governments appear to have a joint parallel COVID-19 strategy by giving military-backed data mining company Palantir access to health data on a mass scale. Palantir, founded by right-wing billionaire Peter Thiel, has links with Cambridge Analytica. Okay, I believe that Peter Thiel was one of the investors. I wouldn't say he was one of the founders, but I have to actually, I have to refresh my memory on that. I have a long memory with respect to Palantir. It goes way back to the 1980s, somewhere. I don't know what Peter Thiel was doing in the early 1980s. I don't think he had taken over Silicon Valley yet. Kay says, tired of being on edge all the time, so stressed out. Listened to a movement for People's Party a while ago, too. They gave me hope for a future, at least. And Alvaro says, Ted Bundy was the nicest person on earth, too, at the time. Good point, Alvaro. Good. Deborah says, hi, guys. Resigned to the grossest administration we could hope for a brave new world here. Yay. Kay says, talk to my granddaughter for a while tonight. Glad to hear they're all staying home for tea day. She still calls me Grammy. Laugh out loud. Avril says, who the fuck can feel good about anyone that was associated with drone killings of innocent people? I don't care how intelligent and well-versed that Avril Ratchet is. Steve says, but she's the nicest person on earth. Steve Wolfbrand says. And Avril says, Steve Wolfbrand, psychopaths usually are. That's how they move and get their victims. Steve says, Thiel not only backed Trump in 2016, but Palantir employees reportedly worked with Cambridge Analytica, harvesting Facebook data ahead of the elections. But Palantir's Kevin Harrington became the deputy assistant to the president for strategic planning. Michael Kratsios, Palantir's chief of staff, became the White House deputy chief technology officer. And Justin McCauley moved from Palantir to special assistant to the defense secretary. Yeah. Kay says, I do like the idea of one of our new American Indians being floated for Department of Interior head, though. Hope that goes through. Yeah, Deb Haaland might go through with that. She might go through there. It's the type of pick Biden would make. It's an identity politics pick. And nor does she seem, she's definitely on the progressive side. I think she was very close to being squad like on certain things, but she never really joined up with the squad. But still, compared to most people in the House, she's probably pretty far to the left. Steve Gunter said, anyone watch Next? Absolutely riveting, like next gen person of interest. Al Romano says, Biden is a sucker for Obama's cronies. I see that already. Well, they were his cronies too. I mean, he was kind of integrated, with that administration. Of course, his really close cronies were his own people, like Tony Blinken was one of his people. So he got real close, with Tony Blinken. That's why I think Jared Bernstein is going to have a high spot. I suspect he got very close with Jared. Kay says, but no Rahm at all. Avril says the black community is going to raise holy hell if Rahm gets in that cabinet, and I will help them. Me too. Me too. No way. I want to see anything from Rahm. I just want Rahm. I just want him to go back to Wall Street. Steve Wolfbrand says, turn this entire empire over to Shama. Kay says, I'm very proud to be an old, a dirty old hippie. An old, dirty hippie, quote unquote. Avril said, Feinstein should never have hugged Lindsay. Kay says, Feinstein is old and needs to go, out of touch. Steve says, never break character on set. Steve Gonzo says. K. Clark Ryan says, if this virus crisis doesn't get single payer, we will never get it. Shake my head. No, we will get it if we keep on pressing and we keep on insisting and we keep on working. We will get it one day. We will get it. Hopefully, I'll still be around when we do get it. That will be a day worth celebrating. And Bonnie says, me too. Steve Wolfman says, day after Christmas, unemployment runs out. Merry Christmas, motherfuckers. Scrooge couldn't have wrote it better. But Palantir vanishes from Biden advisors' biography after she joins campaign. Yeah, I noticed that she was a consultant, for Palantir, and that vanished from her biography during the campaign. She was advising the campaign. Arvo was. Kay says, Kelton needs to teach the head of the Fed. Well, the head of the Fed is a pretty smart lady. She might already have read Stephanie's book and a number of other MMT books. She might already be up to speed, on MMT. Avril Haines, nicest human on earth, decides which wedding party to drone bomb in Afghanistan. A sweetheart indeed. I don't know if she made those decisions herself. In other words, my understanding was She helped to restructure the zone program in a way that all the agency heads could support and that Obama could support, but that the actual decisions, uh, the only one with authority to make uh, 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 those decisions remained Obama. So I don't know if she decided that, if that was her role. Kay says, having to live in this, quote, shithole, unquote, country is too depressing. Steve Wolfbridge says, yeah, I know. Kay says, Costa Rica or Cuba sounds good to me. Kay says, my daughter in Florida is having a hell of a time too, trying to live on unemployment with an old but BF since she can't find a job there. She's very depressed. Yeah, fortunately, when my daughter went out to California, she had a job at that point, and since it was a job that was done at a distance, it didn't really matter where she lived, so she could go out to California and keep that job. And lucky for her, and she still has it. She's been there since 2016, and she still has the job. Steve says AOC sounds a bit depressed. I don't think she realized what a sewer she was entering. I think AOC has been getting a boost lately, though, with the other four who came into Congress. Now she has a bigger group to stand with. They'll have more power. And I'm telling you, with the small majority the Dems have in the House, I think the Dems are going to have to give them a lot more because they can block stuff. If you can block stuff, you can get a lot more. Steve says Janet Yellen's a good pick, probably why the market went over 30,000 today. Thank God I made a little money on that. Steve, I'm very glad that you made a little money on that. That's good. It's good when one of our own makes a little money. Steve Gonzo says, Avril Haines helped create the legal justification for Obama's drone wars, helped cover up the CIA's torture program, then supported Gina Haspel to lead the agency and consulted for Palantir. Haines is on board of directors for Center for New American Security, which is funded by weapons manufacturers, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, also Raytheon, big banks, J.P. Morgan, Chase, Bank of America, fossil fuel corporations, BP America, Chevron. Doc, your love affair with Biden disappoints me. You will be disappointed. I don't have a love affair with Biden. I don't have a love affair. I'm realistic about Biden, I think. I do the analysis I think, okay, is relevant. If he turns out to be a total bust, okay, it's not going to surprise me. Uh, okay, I do think, though, that we need to try to move Biden and to pressure Biden. We can't give up. We have to hit him as hard as we can. And we have to build the movement for a People's Party, not the movement for a People's Party now. It has a name. It is the People's Party now. We have to build up the People's Party and be prepared to split the Democratic Party after the congressional elections of 2022. We have to be prepared to try to get the squad and the main other progressives from the Congress to migrate over to the People's Party and get our own People's Party candidates in as well. Kay says, I have no love affair, but I'm hopeful for some relief. Doc, okay, are you going to take the vaccine? If so, which one? Well, I'm going to take the vaccine that Kaiser provides, okay, most likely. I'll certainly wait to see what they have to say. I'm sure they'll thoroughly vet the vaccines, all the vaccines. According to my policy, they will make the vaccine available for free. Kaiser will. It might cost them something per dose, but the people with my type of policy will get it for free. And I generally trust their doctors, to do a pretty good job on the research. Of course, I'll check it all out, myself. I'll keep tabs on the research, myself. I'll check it all out. If they don't pick the right one, then I will go with one of the other vaccines. I mean, I've always done that. If it costs a few dollars, I'll spend a few dollars. Steve Wolfbrand says, Michelle is a man. How did that get into this discussion, Steve? How did that get? Oh, Michelle Flournoy you're talking about now. Yeah, Michelle Flournoy. Yeah, she. Okay, I guess that's going to do it. For tomorrow, I will be on at 9 o'clock, as usual. Thanksgiving Day, I will take off. I think I'm probably going to come back on Friday night, and do a live stream on Friday night this week. I'm contemplating one anyway, because, I have a lot of things to cover. And, of course, Saturday night, I'll be on, at the usual time. But Thursday, I'm going to be off. And I'm going to be cooking. I'm going to be cooking a feast here for us. And Leta Bezwalgen, hope I pronounced that correctly. I know for sure. There's no chance I pronounced your name correctly. But welcome anyway. And Lita says, still would beat getting the whole virus for those of us who would die of it. Yes, I agree. Laura says, thank you and good night all. Thank you for coming, Dolores. Thank you for staying. Thank you for sharing. And thank you all for being here. And Steve Wolfbrand says, love you guys, Doc. Thank you, Steve. We love you too. Kay says, I hate holidays. All my news shows will be gone. Well, maybe I can get you some progressive short takes to keep you busy by that time. Sandy Degg says, good night. Hey, Sandy, didn't realize you were here. Steve Wolfbrand says, good night. But by the way, if enough people tell me that they want a show on, no, I'm not going to work on Thursday. Bernie's shaking her head. No. Anyway, thank you, Kay. Night. I love you all, Kay says. We love you too, Kay. Take care, everybody. Good luck. Stay safe. Be careful. Stay safe. Everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving, Bonnie says. And I say so too. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Steve says, she's a man, baby. Have a great Thanksgiving, Steve.